There is a particular kind of silence that happens when someone in your family describes the family and you are not in the description. It is not the silence of being excluded from the room. You are in the room. You are sitting at the table. You are holding a fork. You are watching the person you love look directly past you as they name the people in their life who matter and what those people have done. And the silence is not that your name was spoken with anger or disappointment. The silence is that your name was not spoken at all. And by the time you realize what just happened, the room has already moved on, and you are the only person still sitting inside the sentence that skipped you. My name is Nadine Calloway. I am 34 years old. I am a high school earth science teacher living in Roanoke, Virginia. And I want to tell you about the Christmas I left my parents' house before dessert, not because anyone was cruel to me, but because I finally heard the version of our family that everyone else had been telling for years, and I was not in it. I should start with what I built. Because the thing about invisible work is that it only becomes visible when it stops, and by then no one remembers who is doing it, which is the whole problem. For 3 years, from the September I was 31 to the May I was 34, I drove to night classes at Roanoke Community College, 4 evenings a week. I left my transcription desk at MedSource Coding at 5:15, ate a granola bar in the parking lot, and arrived at the science building by 6:40. I sat in a plastic chair under fluorescent lighting and learned how to teach the water cycle and tectonic plates and atmospheric pressure to teenagers who would rather be on their phones. I did this on Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. On Fridays, I graded practice labs at my kitchen table until my eyes could not focus on the rubric lines anymore. I completed a 200-hour student teaching practicum at Patrick Henry High School while still working my transcription job 3 days a week. I woke at 5:10 on practicum days. I packed 2 lunches because I would not be home until after 9 p.m. I stood in front of 27 10th graders and taught them how to read a topographic map while my supervisor, Mrs. Reeves, sat in the back row with a clipboard, and I tried to keep my hands from shaking not because I was afraid of the students, but because I was 33 years old and I had never wanted anything this much, and I could not afford for it not to work. I took the Praxis 2 Earth Science Certification exam in April of my second year. I failed it by 4 points. I took it again in August. I passed. I drove home and sat in my car in the apartment complex parking lot for 11 minutes before I went inside, not because I was upset, but because I needed the car to be quiet around me for a little while, so I could understand that the thing I had been building for 26 months was now actually real. I submitted 14 job applications that summer. I drove to 6 interviews across 3 counties. I bought a blazer from a consignment store on Williamson Road for $12 and wore it to every single one. In September, Patrick Henry High School offered me a full-time position teaching 9th and 10th grade earth science. I accepted it standing in my kitchen at 4:47 in the afternoon on a Wednesday, and I remember the time because the light was coming through the window above the sink at that particular angle it only hits in early fall, and I thought, this is the first thing I have ever built that is entirely mine. I told my family. I told my mother on the phone the evening I was hired. She said, "Oh, that's good, Nadine." She asked if it came with benefits. I said yes. She said, "Well, that's something." Then she told me about my sister Tara's new countertops. I told my father the following weekend when I drove to my parents' house for Sunday lunch. He was watching a football game in the living room. I stood in the doorway and said, "Dad, I got the teaching job. Full-time. Earth science." He said, "Good for you, Dee," without looking up from the screen. Then he asked if Glenn was coming for Thanksgiving this year. I told my brother Glenn at Thanksgiving. He said, "Wait, you went back to school?" He was 37. He had known me my entire life. He did not know I had been in school for 3 years. I stopped telling people after that. Not dramatically. Not as a decision I made in one moment. It was more like a door that closed slowly, so quietly that I did not hear the latch until it was already shut. I stopped volunteering the information. I stopped waiting for someone to ask. I stopped expecting that the next family dinner would be the one where someone said, "So, Nadine, how's the teaching going?" It was not anger. It was arithmetic. I had told them 4 times. The information did not stay. At a certain point you stop restocking a shelf that no one is looking at. Checkpoint A, 891 words. Target, 900 to 1,200 words. On track. The Christmas dinner was at my parents' house on December 23rd. My mother had set the table for 8. There was my father, Richard, my mother, Gail, my brother Glenn, and his wife Priya, my sister Tara and her boyfriend Jordan, my mother's sister, Aunt Carolyn, not the same Carolyn from Rosalind's story, a different woman, a retired school counselor from Blacksburg who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain and had a way of watching a room without participating in its noise. And me, Nadine, the 8th chair. The table was my mother's pride. She had put out the white tablecloth, the one she only used at Christmas and Easter. There were candles. There was a ham. There were 2 kinds of potatoes because Glenn's wife does not eat dairy and my mother had made a second batch with olive oil, which she had mentioned to me 3 times on the phone in the week leading up to dinner, as though this act of dietary accommodation was the emotional equivalent of building a bridge. My father stood up at 7:38 in the evening. I know this because I looked at my phone when he pushed back his chair, not because I was checking the time, but because I had a habit of anchoring myself in small facts when a room was about to shift. He had his wine glass in his hand. He was wearing the green sweater my mother bought him every other year from the same catalog. He cleared his throat. "I want to do something a little different this year," he said. "I want to go around the table, and I want each of us to say what we're proudest of this year. As a family. The Calloway family highlight reel." He smiled. He looked at my mother. She nodded. Glenn went first. He said he was proudest of his promotion to regional manager at the distribution company. He said it was the hardest he had ever worked and the most rewarding year of his career. Priya squeezed his arm. My mother said, "We are so proud of you, Glenn." Tara went next. She said she was proudest of closing on her first house. She described the front porch. She described the backyard. She described the feeling of putting her key in the lock for the first time and knowing it was hers. Jordan said he was proud of her too. My father raised his glass. My father went next. He said he was proudest of his early retirement. He had worked at the same manufacturing plant for 29 years. He said it felt like breathing for the first time. My mother put her hand on his arm. My mother went next. She said she was proudest of the kitchen renovation. She said it had taken 7 months, and she had picked every tile herself, and she wanted everyone to know that the backsplash was hand-cut travertine, which is not the same as machine-cut, and she had driven to 3 stores in Lynchburg to find the right grout color. Then my father looked at Priya. Priya said she was proud of Glenn. Then my father looked at Jordan. Jordan said he was proud of Tara. Then my father looked at me. He opened his mouth. And he said, "Well, I think that covers it. Merry Christmas, everyone." He raised his glass. The table raised their glasses. Someone laughed. Someone clinked. The room moved on. I want to tell you about the next 4 seconds. Because I think those 4 seconds are the only ones in this story that matter, and everything else, the parking lot, the drive, the phone call 3 months later, is just the echo of what happened inside me between 7:46 and 7:50 on December 23rd. My father did not skip me with cruelty. He did not look at me and decide I was not worth mentioning. He simply reached the end of the version of our family that lived in his head, and I was not in it. Not as a teacher. Not as someone who had done something in the last year. Not as someone whose name belonged on the highlight reel. He looked at me and decided there was nothing left to say. I was sitting directly to his left. I had driven 41 minutes from my apartment in Roanoke to be at this table. I had brought a sweet potato casserole that I made at 6 a.m. that morning. I had been a licensed high school teacher for 3 months and 12 days. And my father looked at me and said, "Well, I think that covers it." Aunt Carolyn was sitting across from me. She did not say anything. She did not reach for my hand. She did not make a face or shake her head or perform the kind of visible sympathy that is really a request for the other person to reassure you that they are fine. She looked at me. She looked at me the way someone looks when they have watched a pattern repeat for years, and the pattern has just completed itself one more time, and they are simply noting it. Plainly. Without theater. She held my gaze for perhaps 2 seconds. Then she looked down at her plate. I waited. Not because I was deciding what to do. I think I had already decided. I waited because the table needed a moment to reestablish itself, and I did not want my leaving to become a scene, because a scene would have meant a conversation, and a conversation would have meant my father saying, "What did I do?" in that genuinely confused voice he uses when he has hurt someone without noticing, and I would have had to explain it, and I was finished explaining it. The table was talking about the ham. Someone asked for more potatoes. Glenn was telling a story about a coworker. I cleared my plate. I carried it to the kitchen counter and set it down gently beside the sink. I walked to the hallway. I picked up my bag from the chair by the front door, the same chair where I had set it when I arrived 3 hours earlier, back when I still thought this dinner might be different. I put on my coat. I opened the front door. I stepped outside. The air was 37 degrees, and it smelled like wood smoke from the neighbor's chimney, and the cold hit my face the way cold always does when you leave a house that is too warm, and for a moment, just a moment, the cold felt like the most honest thing that had happened to me all evening. I was in my car before anyone noticed I had left. Checkpoint B, 2,997 words. Target, 2,800 to 3,500 words. Acts 3 to 5 need approximately 5,000 to 6,000 more words. On track. I want to tell you about those next few minutes. Not the dinner. Not the toast. Not the moment my father said, "Well, I think that covers it." Those minutes in the car. I think they are the most important part of the story because they are the minutes where I finally stopped translating what had just happened into something I could tolerate and started feeling what it actually was. I sat in my parents' driveway with the engine running and the headlights off. It was 7:54 p.m. The dashboard clock had that faint green glow that makes everything feel like 2 a.m. even when it is not. I could see the living room window from where I was parked. The curtains were partially open. I could see the top of the Christmas tree. I could see the shape of someone moving in the kitchen, probably my mother, wrapping the leftover ham in aluminum foil the way she always does, folding the edges 3 times because she read somewhere that 3 folds keeps the moisture in better than 2. I sat there for 6 minutes. I know because I watched the clock move from 7:54 to 8 o'clock, and I did not touch the steering wheel or the radio or my phone during any of that time. I just sat with the engine running and my hands in my lap and let the thing I had been holding for 3 months and 12 days, the weight of being a licensed teacher whose family did not know she was a licensed teacher or knew and could not hold on to it, which is worse. I let it sit in the car with me. I did not push it away. I did not reorganize it. I let it take up space. This is what it felt like. Not anger, not sadness, not the sharp, named thing you can point to and say, "That is the emotion, and here is where it lives." It was more like a building that has been carrying weight unevenly for years, one wall bearing more than it was designed for, the load shifting slowly, imperceptibly, every Thanksgiving and every phone call and every Sunday lunch where someone asked about Glenn's job or Tara's house and no one asked about mine, and the building does not collapse. It does not fall. The wall just stops bearing it, not because it chose to, because it reached the tolerance threshold. And when the load shifts, the building does not come apart. It just stands differently. It stands as the shape it actually is, not the shape it was being forced into. I thought about what I had done. Not in the sweeping way, not, "I went to school for 3 years," but in the specific way. The granola bars in the parking lot at 5:15. The fluorescent lights in the science building at 6:40. The rubric lines blurring on Friday nights. Mrs. Reeves's clipboard. The praxis exam, and the 4 points I missed, and the parking lot where I sat for 11 minutes after I passed. The blazer from the consignment store on Williamson Road. The phone call at 4:47 p.m. when the light was coming through the kitchen window. Each one of those was a brick. I had laid them one at a time for evenings a week, for 3 years. And the building was real. The building was standing. The building had students in it. But it was not in the highlight reel. I thought about what I was waiting for. I had never named it before. Not to myself, not to Dr. Patel, the therapist I had been seeing on Tuesday mornings since October, not to anyone. But sitting in the driveway at 8 p.m. on December 23rd with the engine running and the Christmas tree visible through the curtain, I named it. I was waiting for someone in my family to say, "I see what you built." Not "good for you." Not "oh, that's nice." Not the words that land and dissolve before you can feel them. I was waiting for someone to say, I watched you do the hardest thing you have ever done, and I am telling you right now that I saw it, and it was real, and it was yours. That is what I was waiting for. And it was not going to come. Not because my family was incapable of love. They loved me. I believe that. My mother called me every Wednesday. My father remembered my birthday. Glenn and Tara showed up. They showed up to the table. They showed up to the house. They loved me in the way they knew how to love, which was the way they had always loved, which was to be in the room with me and not see what I was carrying. I put the car in reverse at 8:02. I backed out of the driveway. I turned left on Brambleton Avenue and drove the same 41 minutes home that I had driven to get there, except the roads were empty now, and the streetlights were doing that orange thing they do in winter where the light sits lower and flatter, and everything looks like a photograph of a place where no one lives. I did not turn on the radio. I did not call anyone. I drove with the window cracked 2 inches because the cold air against my left hand felt like the only thing that was exactly as it seemed. Cold air does not rearrange itself to protect your feelings. Cold air is just cold. I needed something to be just what it was. I arrived at my apartment at 8:43. I unlocked the door. I set my bag on the kitchen table, the small square table I bought from a secondhand store on Salem Turnpike when I moved in 4 years ago. It had a scratch on the top left corner where I had dropped a cast iron pan the first week, and I never fixed it, and I liked it. The scratch was mine. The table was mine. The apartment was mine. I hung my coat on the hook by the door. I stood in the kitchen. There was a coffee mug in the sink from that morning, the blue one with the chipped handle that I kept because it was exactly the right size for the amount of coffee I drink, which is more than a teacup and less than a travel mug. There was a stack of ungraded lab reports on the counter next to the toaster. There was a single tangerine in the fruit bowl. I stood there for a long time, not doing anything, not deciding anything, just standing in my own kitchen at 8:47 p.m. on December 23rd, in the apartment I pay for with the salary from the job I earned with the degree I built in 3 years of night classes, and feeling something I had not felt in a very long time. Not triumph. Not vindication. Not the satisfaction of having proven something to someone. Something smaller and more structural than any of those. The feeling of standing in a room that does not require you to explain why you are in it. The feeling of your own walls holding your own weight. Not collapse. Realignment. I ate the tangerine. I graded 2 lab reports. I went to bed at 10:14 and slept better than I had slept in months, and I do not think that was because anything had been resolved. I think it was because something had finally been named. The first text came on December 26th at 11:07 a.m. It was from my mother. Nadine, you left early on Christmas Eve. Is everything okay? You didn't say goodbye. I read it. I noticed 3 things about it. First, she called December 23rd Christmas Eve, which it was not. It was December 23rd. The dinner was on the 23rd. She had already rewritten the timeline. Second, you left early, as though I had simply decided to go home for scheduling reasons, not because my father had completed his description of the family and I was not in it. Third, you didn't say goodbye, which placed the problem on my departure, not on what happened before it. I did not respond. Not that day. Not the next day. Glenn texted on December 28th. Hey Dee, Mom says you left Christmas early? Everything good? I noticed that Glenn had gotten the date wrong too. He called it Christmas. It was the 23rd. The family was already consolidating the evening into a single word, Christmas, that smoothed over every edge until it was just another holiday that someone left early. I did not respond to Glenn either. Tara did not text. This did not surprise me. Tara and I had the kind of sibling relationship that existed primarily in proximity. We sat at the same table, we attended the same events, we exchanged birthday gifts with the same 3-day window of lateness, but we did not call each other. We did not text unless there was a logistics question. I was not hurt by Tara's silence. I was simply noting it. On January 3rd, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. His message was 14 seconds long. He said, Dee, your mother says you left early at Christmas. Give us a call when you get a chance. Hope you're doing all right. 14 seconds. He did not mention the toast. He did not mention the proudest moment round. He did not mention that he had looked at me and decided there was nothing left to say. His voicemail was the verbal equivalent of checking a box. Daughter contacted. Obligation met. Move on. Over the next several weeks, I watched the structural absence take shape. It happened slowly. It happened the way things always happen when one person stops doing the invisible work, not with a dramatic reveal, but with a series of small gaps that no one understands because no one knew the work was being done. My mother's birthday was January 14th. For the past 6 years, I had been the one who organized the dinner, who called the restaurant, who confirmed the reservation time, who reminded Glenn and Tara 2 weeks in advance, and then again 3 days before. I had done this quietly, the way I did most things for this family, not because anyone asked, but because I noticed what needed to be done, and I did it. This year, I did not call the restaurant. I did not text Glenn. I did not text Tara. I did not remind anyone of anything. On January 15th, Glenn texted me. Hey, did anyone do anything for Mom's birthday? I forgot. Did you set something up? I did not respond. On January 16th, my mother called. She sounded confused but not wounded. She said, I thought maybe we were doing my birthday this weekend instead? Glenn mentioned something about a dinner, but no one seems to know where. She paused. Did you book anywhere, Nadine? No, I said. It was the first word I had spoken to my family in 23 days. Oh, a pause. I thought you usually. I didn't this year, I said. Another pause. Well, that's fine. We can do something next weekend. They did not do something next weekend. No one booked a restaurant. No one called. My mother's birthday dinner did not happen. It simply ceased to exist, the way things cease to exist when the person who is making them happen stops making them happen, and everyone else discovers they do not know how to start. In February, Aunt Carolyn called. She did not start with small talk. She did not ask me how I was doing. She said, I saw what happened at the table, Nadine. I want you to know I saw it. I was sitting in my kitchen table grading papers. It was a Tuesday evening at 6:23. I set my pen down. I know you did, I said. Your father is not a cruel man, she said. But he is a man who builds a version of things in his head, and then he lives inside that version, and if something does not fit the version, he does not see it. He has been doing it since he was a boy. Your grandmother was the same way. She had a story about who each of her children was, and she held that story so tightly that when the children changed, she did not change the story. She just stopped seeing the parts that didn't match. I know, I said. That does not make it acceptable, Aunt Carolyn said. I am not calling to explain him. I am calling to tell you that I was in the room and I saw you sit there and listen to your father describe his family without you in it, and I saw you decide something in those 4 seconds, and I want you to know that whatever you decided, I understand it. I did not say anything for a moment. Then I said, Thank you, Aunt Carolyn. You don't have to call him back, she said. You don't have to do anything. I just wanted you to know that someone at that table saw you. I saw you. She hung up. She did not say, I love you. She did not say, he'll come around. She did not offer a solution or a suggestion or a timeline for repair. She said what she saw and she stopped. That was enough. That was more than enough. In September, Mrs. Linden, the woman who lived 2 houses down from my parents on Grandin Road, ran into my mother at the grocery store. Mrs. Linden's daughter taught English at the same school where I taught earth science. She mentioned to my mother, casually, the way neighbors mention things, that Nadine had been nominated for a regional teaching award by her department chair. My mother did not know. My mother did not know I had been nominated. My mother did not know my department chair's name. My mother did not know I had been teaching earth science to 200 students for a full calendar year, and that 3 of them had written me notes at the end of the school year saying I was the first teacher who made them feel like science was something they were allowed to be good at. My mother called me that evening. Her voice was different, not angry, not hurt, but dislocated, the way someone sounds when a wall they were leaning against turns out to be further away than they thought. Mrs. Linden told me you were nominated for some kind of teaching award, she said. Yes, I said. I didn't. Why didn't you tell us? I did tell you, Mom. I told you when I got the job. I told you when I passed the certification. I told Dad. I told Glenn. I told Tara at Thanksgiving 2 years ago. Silence. You told us? 4 times. More silence. Then, very quietly, I don't remember you telling us that. I know, I said. That's the whole thing. She did not respond for a long time. When she did, she said, well, I'm glad Mrs. Linden told me. I wish I'd known sooner. You did know sooner, I said. You knew 4 times. The call ended without resolution. I expected that. On a Tuesday morning in March, at 9:14 a.m., the kind of Tuesday where the sky is gray and still and the air smells like the last week of winter, I called my mother. I had not planned the call. I had not rehearsed the words. I had been sitting at my kitchen table with my coffee, the blue mug with the chipped handle, looking at the stack of permission slips I needed to sign for a field trip to the Blue Ridge Parkway Geology Overlook, and I picked up the phone and called. Mom, I said, I want to say something. I'm not going to explain it, and I'm not going to say it twice. She was quiet. At Christmas, Dad went around the table and asked everyone to share their proudest moment. He asked Glenn. He asked Tara. He asked himself. He asked you. He asked Priya and Jordan. And when he got to me, he said, well, I think that covers it. I was sitting right next to him. I had driven 41 minutes to be there. I had been a licensed teacher for 3 months. And he looked at me and decided there was nothing to say. My mother started to say something. I did not stop. I told you about my degree 4 times. I told Dad. I told Glenn. None of you remembered. And then when Mrs. Linden mentioned the teaching award, you called me and said you wished you had known sooner.
But you did know, Mom.
You knew, and it did not stay. And I have spent 3 years building the most important thing I have ever built, and I cannot keep explaining that it exists. I am finished doing that. Silence. Then my mother said, Nadine, I didn't realize. I know, I said. That is exactly what I have been sitting with. The call ended. She did not cry. I did not cry. No one raised their voice. No one apologized. The conversation lasted 4 minutes and 20 seconds, and it contained exactly one true thing, and then it was over. I am not going to tell you that my family changed. I am not going to tell you that my father called and said he was sorry that he saw me now, that he understood what he had done. He may. He may not. I have stopped investing in the prediction. The prediction was the thing that was using me up, not the family, not the dinner, not the toast. The prediction. The belief that if I explained it one more time, clearly enough, gently enough, specifically enough, someone would finally hold on to it. I set the prediction down the same way I set my plate down in that kitchen on December 23rd, quietly, without announcement. And I walked forward. Recognition is not memory. Attention is not understanding. Being in the room is not the same as being in the story. On a Saturday morning in late April, I sat on the back step of my apartment with a cup of coffee. The air was cool and smelled like new grass and damp concrete. A cardinal landed on the fence post 3 feet away from me. It stayed there for almost a full minute, long enough for me to notice the exact red of it, the way it turned its head once to the left and once to the right, the way it looked at nothing in particular and seemed completely satisfied with where it was. It did not need anyone to say its name. It was just there, being exactly what it was on a fence post in the morning in the world. That was enough. That was more than enough. If you have ever built something real, something that cost you years, something that required you to show up 4 nights a week and sit in a plastic chair and fail an exam and pass it and stand in front of a room full of teenagers and say, this is what I know and I am going to teach it to you. And if the people you love most have looked past it, not with malice but with something quieter and more permanent than malice, I want to ask you something gently. How long have you been building it? And how long have you been waiting for someone in your family to describe the family and include you in the description? And what would it feel like, not triumphant, not angry, not vindicated, but just quiet and true, to stop needing them to see it because you already know what you built, and you already know it is real, and the building is standing, and the students are in it, and your name is on the door?